Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. Welcome to episode 104 of the Sisters in Loss podcast. After 2 miscarriages, today's guest experienced preterm labor at 26 weeks. Carrita Flie would not have chosen this journey to motherhood. After her miscarriages, one that happened in the first trimester and one in the second, she was labeled high risk and had to see a specialist weekly when she became pregnant with her rainbow baby. At 21 weeks, she was told her cervix was shortened and received a cervical cerclage. Even though Carrita had a cerclage, she experienced preterm labor at 26 weeks, where she delivered her son, and he spent 117 days in the neonatal intensive care unit, or the NICU. In this episode, she takes us back on how she healed from her miscarriages, going into labor at 26 weeks, and raising a micropreemie. This episode is for you to listen to if you have been diagnosed high risk, experienced cervical incompetence, and have had a baby in the NICU. Here is Carrita Flle. Well, thank you, Carrita, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to begin with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, I am 27 years old. I just graduated from Washington University School of Law this past May. And right now I'm just home with my son, who was a micropreemie. He just turned a year old. So I'm home caring for him right now. But I'm also kind of working on doing some NICU advocacy and support for current NICU moms.
Awesome. So yes, take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your loss story and your NICU journey.
Okay, I've actually had 2 miscarriages, completely unexpected, was not planning to have a child at that time at all, but I was very excited when I found out that I had conceived, and the journey was pretty simple. There was no indication that I would miscarry or anything like that. And the night before my miscarriage, I had an appointment with my OB at about 7 p.m. He saw me. Everything was perfect. I was 14 weeks. Everything was going great. And he told me, okay, I'll see you again in about 4 more weeks. Well, I went home. I kind of went to bed. Everything was fine. That next morning, I was having a lot of cramping. So I didn't go to work. I didn't go to school or anything. I just stayed home to rest. And towards the middle of the day, I realized that I had a lot of discomfort in my back and in my abdominal area. And so I went to the bathroom just to see what was going on. And almost immediately, there was like an overflow of blood that was coming out. So, of course, I panicked. I called 911. I called my boyfriend from work to come get me from home. And on the way to the hospital, we were driving and I began to bleed uncontrolled. And by the grace of God, there was actually a police officer on the side of us. And we were able to flag him down, blow the horn, and he pulled over to see what was going on. He opened the car door and saw the blood everywhere and just told us to follow him. He turned on his sirens, led us to the hospital. When we arrived there, they saw me immediately because of how much blood I had lost and everything. And at this point, I pretty much knew that I had miscarried. There was no way I had experienced so much blood loss and the child had survived. So we get to the emergency room. The doctor comes in, does an exam, and of course, my uterus is empty. So I'm pretty sure that I had passed the child at home before I even got to the emergency room. So they did a D&C, and that was that experience. That was the first miscarriage. And The second one was 2 years later. Again, this is not necessarily planned, but I was very excited, especially having already experienced one loss. It was, I felt like God was giving me another chance, and I was extremely grateful for that. However, this pregnancy was a little different. I was having complications from the beginning, bleeding, discomfort, cramping, things of that nature. And at 12 weeks, I went into the ER complaining of discomfort and some spotting, and they did an ultrasound, and the baby still had a very strong heartbeat, but was already halfway out of my uterus. So they told me that at 12 weeks, of course, there was nothing they could do but let the baby pass. So I went home and everything was fine. I was just, completely heartbroken that I'd had to literally sit and wait for my child to pass because it was already, coming out of my uterus. The next day I had a significant amount of bleeding. And so I went back to the emergency room and I actually passed the child in the bathroom at the ER. And this was very traumatic for me because you're thinking at 12 weeks, it's just this tiny little fetus that you don't really notice. But I actually saw the fetus in the toilet. So that was extremely traumatic for me. And again, they did a DNC because I had some blood clots in the uterus. So they had to surgically take care of that. And that was that experience. So those were my 2 miscarriages.
Wow. Both of those are very traumatic experiences. So really tell us how did you grieve those losses?
The first loss was extremely hard for me because, like I said, I was still in college in undergrad and I had no clue. First, I had to wrap my head around expecting to have a child at 23. And then I had to wrap my head around, well, now this child is gone. And it was hard for me because I felt like it was a punishment almost for, being young and conceiving, and I shouldn't have done that kind of thing. And there was a lot of guilt attached to that one. And I kind of just swept it under the rug. I threw away all the ultrasounds, any pictures I had where you could tell that I was pregnant. I deleted them, got rid of that. That just kind of went, I erased it. I pretended like that did not happen. But when I experienced the second loss, that's when I realized that I had to accept what had happened to me, face it head on, and heal. Actually give myself time to heal from that. And I kind of feel like I had to experience that second loss to understand the first one. And that took a lot of prayer and seeking God to understand why I had gone through this. But it was so good for me to meet other moms who had gone through this, especially young moms. Because when you're young, you feel like, well, if I had a miscarriage, it had to be something that I did wrong because young people don't have miscarriages. But how wrong was I? There are so many young women who go through this daily and keep silent about it because it's almost like embarrassment, like you brought this on yourself. So for me, finding other groups of women who had experienced this, women that I could help, that I could hold their hand through the healing process and seek God on how to help other women. In turn, I was able to help myself. So I feel like my grief process and my healing came in helping other women through their losses.
Absolutely. So talk to us about your trying again journey and how that process went to try again and to go through your pregnancy.
Okay. For me, it was kind of like, there's no way that I could try again because if I have another miscarriage, I am just going to lose my mind. There is absolutely no way that I'm going to get pregnant again because I just cannot stand to go through that again. But you realize that you can't live your life like that because then it's like you're always going to have this negative thing attached to pregnancy, this horrible feeling and thought that arises in you every time you think of conceiving. So for me, when I found out that I was pregnant with my son, I couldn't be happy. I couldn't be excited at all because it was like, well, I'm probably just going to have another miscarriage because that's what keeps happening to me. That became my story. I conceived, I miscarried. And I had to break myself from that. When I was about 8 weeks pregnant, the doctor told me that this would for sure be considered a high-risk pregnancy because of my 2 prior losses. So I would see a maternal fetal medicine specialist every week until I gave birth. They would measure my cervix and everything like that. And so I was like, you kind of get overwhelmed because like, this is not what a pregnancy is supposed to be. You find out you're pregnant and you expect to have this beautiful, glorious journey, but it was hard. It was hard. I was extremely sick. I was in and out of the hospital. It was just like, okay, God, really? I've had 2 miscarriages and you still didn't make this easy on me. But you have to find your strength in that. And you have to understand that there's a reason for everything that you go through. And that's what began to carry me through that pregnancy. And at 21 weeks, I went in for a regular checkup with the OB, and he realized that my cervix had gone from 4 centimeters long to just 1 centimeter. And immediately I felt like, you have to be kidding me. I'm going to lose another child. And that was heartbreaking. But I went in immediately for surgery to have a cervical cerclage put in. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the cerclage, it's a stitch that goes into your cervix that tries to keep it closed to keep you from miscarrying or experiencing preterm labor. So I was put on bed rest after receiving the cerclage. And again, it's nothing happy about that because it's like, this is not what I pictured for myself. It was such a struggle. And at 26 weeks, I still experienced preterm labor, even with the cerclage. So then you start to get angry with God and you start to get angry with yourself because you're like, why can't I do this right? I just still can't get it right after miscarriages and everything that I've gone through. And my son was born weighing 1 pound, 13 ounces at exactly 26 weeks. And he was in the NICU for 116 days. So this is a whole other roller coaster that I now have to ride on after still being angry with myself and with God because I had 2 miscarriages and still didn't have, the perfect textbook pregnancy.
Today's podcast episode is sponsored by Living Waters Doula Services. Out of her belly will flow rivers of living water. Rivers carry life and bring it forth to those who need it. I am excited to begin offering Living Waters Doula services to my sisters-in-laws. What is a doula? A doula is a non-clinically trained support person who provides emotional, physical, and informational assistance before, during, and after childbirth. My goal as your doula is to help you heal, remove anxiety and fear, and find peace and hope on your infertility and pregnancy journey. If you are currently trying to conceive and would like fertility support, if you are currently pregnant after loss, or if you want grief support for your recent loss, I'm available to share space with you as your doula and support you on this journey. For more details about Living Waters Doula Services, visit ericamcafee.com/doula. That is ericamcafee.com/DOULA. I'm excited to share space with you.
So my son is now a year old, and now that I've made it through that journey and I've gone on a process of healing and finding my strength and my voice and everything that I went through, I've been able to tie all that together into now being the best mom that I can be because you've experienced the worst. And I feel like for me, having gone through that and having experienced those losses and that NICU journey and nearly losing my son in the NICU, it's like, okay, this has given me strength I didn't even know existed, but I need it. So I had to find, and I think that that's important for anyone who goes on a journey of loss or miscarriage, even having a premature child in the NICU. You have to find your purpose in that pain. And for me, it was finding my strength in my voice.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So what tools or resources that you have used that has helped you on your healing journey?
The biggest one I would have to say would be my Bible and prayer. Definitely seeking God for direction, for healing, for peace of mind, for freeing yourself of that guilt that I talked about. It's extremely important to keep God first in that, for me anyway, because you can't do it by yourself. You can't wake up one day and decide, okay, I'm better. I'm not sad anymore that I lost my child. It's not going to work like that. You need something to cling to, something to hold on to for hope. And for me, that was absolutely prayer and my Bible. Secondly, it was getting familiar with other moms who had gone through this. So for me, social media was big. There's so many, accounts and individuals who have made pages that share their stories of loss and infertility and things like that. Just like this incredible Sisters in Loss project is amazing. It's beautiful. And women like me need that, because you need that sense of community and understanding that you're not by yourself. So you can walk on this journey of healing with others. And also in me helping other women heal and helping other women understand what they've gone through and trying to process it helps me every day. Because even talking to other women about their children being in the NICU or experiencing miscarriage after miscarriage, the stillbirth, kind of going through those processes with them, I still learn new things. I still find new things that I need to heal and bring back full circle for me. So I think those would be the things that helped me the most.
Thank you for sharing that. So what encouragement can you give the mom out there who has gone through a NICU journey? I know now we are in winter season, for us moms who have had preemies, whether it's a micropreemie or regular preemie, we know all of the symptoms that can happen to babies who are born prematurely, who have, underdeveloped lungs, whether it's RSV or the flu or pneumonia. I mean, it's the game comes and goes, especially when you have a child that's more prone to catching colds and things.
Yes.
So give the moms out there some kind of guidance, especially for people who are unfamiliar with the challenges of being a mom to a preemie baby.
Okay, well, let me just say that my son got RSV and pneumonia in the NICU at 34 weeks. One of the nurses was ill, and she didn't realize it until after her shift. So my poor little fragile 3-pound baby had RSV in the NICU, and that's what nearly claimed his life. So for me, germs and illnesses are like on a whole nother level. And I try to explain that to other moms. I have to use my own story to help other moms. Some people don't understand that when you sneeze around a preemie or you cough or you have a runny nose, it's like, oh, I'm not sick. I just have, my nose is running or it's allergies. You can't take that chance with the preemie because their body cannot withstand things like that at all. They have no reserve. They have nothing built up. Their lungs are so fragile from being intubated and on oxygen. They just can't deal with it. So I definitely feel like you have to be your child's voice. If you're going out in public, keep them wrapped up, tell people you can admire them, but from afar. Don't touch them, please. They're not at that point where they can, they can't heal from certain illnesses and things like that. And even in your own home, people want to come over, they want to visit. You have to be firm in saying, no, your child comes first. And I think that sometimes, especially on the NICU journey or parents with preemies, they don't want to be mean. They don't want to come off mean and say, don't touch my child. You can't hold them. But you have to realize that sometimes it's a matter of life and death for those babies. So you have to make that decision if it's going to be life or it's going to be death. So you truly have to be your child's advocate in your voice to make sure that they are not exposed to things that can harm them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I remember when my son got I think he got RSV, the flu, and pneumonia within his first 2 years of life. So
oh my gosh.
I completely understand as a NICU mom, as a preemie mom, how to make sure you keep your child in a bubble. And essentially that's what we do from pretty much October to like March.
Yep, that's it. That is it.
We keep our babies in a bubble, make sure no one touches them. They are well taken care of. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Absolutely. So let's talk about encouraging words for the mom that's out there who has experienced, recurrent miscarriages. And she just needs some encouraging words on to try again. She's looking to try again. So what kind of encouraging words can you leave with her?
The biggest thing that I would tell her is that you have to free yourself of guilt. I think we all kind of, whether it's spoken or unspoken or just in the back of our minds, feel like we're doing something wrong. And I think that's the biggest thing that you have to free yourself of. Know that you did not fail your child. You did not fail your spouse. You did not fail yourself. This is not something that you had control over. So free yourself of that guilt, get your confidence back, get your hope back, get your faith back, and know that this is a journey that you can go on. You may need a lot of prayer, a lot of support, and get those people around you who are truly going to hold your hand and be there for you no matter what happens on this journey. But the biggest thing, like I said, is do not feel guilty. Do not be afraid that you're going to fail. Have faith and confidence in yourself and in your journey that you will succeed, and that one day, God willing, you will have the child that you are praying for.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Carrita, for being on the podcast. Where can we get in contact with you after this episode? Where can we find you on social?
My Instagram is C like cat .Lenice, LENIECE. And I also have a Facebook that is Carrita, CARRITA, Flie, F as in Frank, LIE.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carrita, for being on the podcast and sharing your story and your light. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you again for having me. And thank you for creating Sisters in Loss, because there are so many women who are going to be blessed and inspired by this. So thank you, Erica, for doing what you do.
Awesome. You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I pray that this show was inspirational and a blessing to you. For show notes, visit ericamcafee.com/podcast. Please join us in our offline discussions in our private Facebook group by going to sistersinloss.com. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, please rate and subscribe to us and leave us a 5-star review. I pray that you all have a blessed week. Keep the faith, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.
Welcome to another round of Boardroom or Miro Board. Today we talk retrospectives with Agile coach Maria. Let's go. First question. You've spent 2 hours in a team retro, but the only input you've heard is Dave's. Boardroom or Miro Board?
Boardroom. In Miro, Dave can't hog the space because everyone can add thoughts anonymously, online at the same time.
Correct. Next. You need the team to act on feedback fast, so you turn all those retro notes into Jira tasks instantly.
Miro all the way. And I can assign those tasks to teammates.
You're nailing this. Now, you see hundreds of sticky notes from the retro. A real mess. But you organize them into 5 themes in just seconds.
Miro, I basically get back an entire hour when I use its AI tools for clustering.
And she's done it.
Join over 60 million people running actually enjoyable and actionable retros in Miro. Get your first 3 boards free at Miro.com. That's Miro.com.